In the world that you're talking about, only wealthy people would study art. Only wealthy people would study philosophy. Only wealthy people would study English. Only wealthy people would study civics. Only wealthy people would study archaeology or study anthropology, or only wealthy people would, our humanities would only be dominated by people who enter into college wealthy because they would be unencumbered by the concerns that you're talking about in terms of like, I need a return on investment here. I mean,
So this is where we start to get into what I consider the crazy argument that Sam is making. I'm curious if there's an unsaid argument here, which is that the reason he's so put off by the idea that wealthy people would be the only people that could get into these fields like anthropology and stuff like this is that a lot of these are like leftist dominated fields. And if only wealthy people got in these fields, maybe he's worried that it would like lose its leftiness because like, all the bougie class, people are gonna drag it to the right or something. Maybe that's what Sam is thinking here.
sure.
Though did you even listen to what I said?
No.
You're typing to someone in chat. What's
I
happening?
was typing. Yeah, someone's giving me a hard time about staying out in San Francisco.
Oh, okay. But maybe that's Sam's thinking. He's worried about that. Though I would say that
What is Sam worried about? Sam's
he's
not
worried
worried
that if
about
only
anything.
rich people go into these, lefty dominated fields like
Mm.
anthropology and sociology, that they'll lose their leftiness, because the rich people will basically make it right wing essentially.
I mean, he's high. What are you talking about? Like
No, I'm saying maybe that's his thought, but I'm saying maybe it's not his
all
thought
these
because
bougie, rich
are all
progressives,
socialist.
yeah,
Yeah, right,
are
right.
all
So maybe that's
socialists.
not the thought. So,
Socialists
but then,
are rich kids.
right. So, but then this argument to me is like totally insane because it's like
Yeah, you
if
want to
you,
set up the poor kid, from the hood with a philosophy degree so he can be unemployed
yeah, exactly. It's like, well, wait a minute,
and
Sam.
with $100,000 in student debt. Sure,
Right.
that sounds like a great idea.
Well, I mean, this is totally like his feels over reals
Yeah.
because you say, well, wait a minute, Sam. It's true, that if you do require some amount of wealth starting from it. For most people, I mean, maybe someone could turn an art degree into something that makes a lot of money, but most people will not be able to do that. And so you do require at least some amount of wealth going into the situation if you want to study something like art history
Mm.
or some or philosophy or something of that nature. You might need to have some wealth, backing you up there or not. And that's the reality of the situation. Because as you said, if you don't have money, why would you want to incentivize people who need money to go into fields where they're not going to make any fucking money or they're very risky to make money? This seems like a terrible idea.
Yeah, it's awful. But this is why I'm so against most of the policy proposals of progressives is because they're just thoughtlessly bad for the people who need good policy.
Well, it's based totally on just a blind fairness, care harm feeling. Like, well, it's not fair that only rich people, quote unquote, rich people, right, get to study certain things in college. And it's like, okay, that might not be fair, but I don't, unless you're going to pay for that person's entire life, if you're trying to make people that can, create families that are self-sustaining, that's just the reality situation. People need to get jobs that make money. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Well, also, I think part of it is the authenticity paradigm. And I'm
Right.
starting to realize that there really is kind of a separation between the sincerity paradigm for identity and the authenticity paradigm for right and left. I feel like liberals far more play into the authenticity paradigm. And authenticity is basically just this idea that there is an inner you that
No, of
you
course.
need
Right.
to express to the world at any cost. And the sincerity
paradigm is a paradigm of identity that says, you are embedded in a community that you have certain responsibilities to, that you need to accept and come to terms with.
Right.
And that's a very conservative way to look at identity construction. And he's even saying, look, college is where you say, you're building a lot of your identity out of what you choose to study in college. And Sam is saying, listen, you need to build that identity, however you see fit. Consult your inner you and say, hey, if I'm a sociologist, if I'm a black feminist, regardless of whether or not the world needs more black feminists, I need to express my inner self. And this guy's saying, well, wait a second here. Society needs more STEM people. We need more doctors. We need more engineers. We need to look at society and say, what does society need, and incentivize people to voluntarily fill those roles? Which is, it's just a fundamentally different way of looking at the world.
Right. Well, it's interesting that, because you're completely right, and that is a classical left-right divide.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I feel like this kind of comes up in, when, Crowder says the Nazis are leftists, and you're like, that's completely wrong. And it's interesting too, as part of what's interesting about wokeness is because for most of my lifetime, you were correct. It was the right that was pushing a more group-oriented attitude of thinking and conceptualizing about the world. You need to get a job based on what helps your family. Not necessarily like, it wasn't about discovering who you are. It was about, you need to do something for your family or to produce a family in the future. Like, who you are was not really a question that was ever wasn't really a right-wing question that was being posed.
It's not just the family. It's who are the nationalists? The nation.
Right, you have to do things for the nation, yeah.
Yeah. The left doesn't even want to call themselves nationalists. They've turned being a nationalist into some sort of ethnic, racist thing.
Well, and that's what's sort of, I feel like that's why we need like some other way of conceptualizing this. It's interesting because like the left-wingness of the communists and the left-wingness of the liberals are very, very different in so many ways. And this is part of the ways in which they're different, because the communists don't believe in this individuality either. It's what can you do for the good of like the class,
Yeah.
of the fellow workers. It's very this whole it's just so weird. It kind of turns everything on its head.
You're talking about, just to be clear, and different people can have different opinions about this, but the society you're talking about is where we do not provide higher education to people who are anything but wealthy in terms of just being educated. Right? Like you need to go in and really for you, higher education should be strictly vocational, for the non-wealthy in this.
If your college degree isn't going to earn you enough to be able to pay for it, yeah, I think it's probably not a good idea. If it's not a good individual investment, I don't see why it would be a good societal investment.
How is this? I'm so shocked that
I know,
Sam's
how's it
making this
controversial?
argument. I know that's so obviously basic. Yes.
It's like if you don't have money, you kind of have to think, well, how am I going to pay for my life?
Right.
You can't just make frivolous purchases, right? I think poor people are acquainted with this situation. You got Sam Seder coming in here going, listen, we need to structure society so the poorest can get philosophy degrees. What we need is more poor people being poor but educated.
Right. It's like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's not that only wealthy people.
I just want to be clear. You don't think that there is value to society to have a wide range of socioeconomic people be teachers or be archaeologists or be
I don't know. It's such a weird archaeologist is the way. I don't know.
Is there how many archaeologists are in America? I'm curious.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird one to focus on.
How many people are archaeologists?
Right. That's strange. I don't know anything about archaeology. I don't know how much money the average archaeologist makes. I don't know what kind of job the average archaeologist is actually engaged in, but they're obviously not all running around the world like Indiana Jones, brushing off not dinosaur bones, paleontologists, but like,
archaeologists are so slim that they have to lump them in with anthropologists.
Well, there you go.
National estimates for anthropologists and archaeologists is 6,650 with a
wait, the 6,000 archaeologists in the entire country?
Yes. And the mean annual wage is $66,000. So
that's pretty good. So yeah. Okay. I don't know, but I don't. Okay, that's pretty good, right?
Yeah, sure. That's a good middle class wage. Sure.
Yeah, but This funny as you said, there's only 6,000.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that we need a lot more than 6,000.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, if a school wanted to churn out, let's say 10,000, it would probably drive that wage down considerably, right?
Right.
Twice as many people vying for those very limited archaeology jobs.
That is so funny. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Wow. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. Archaeologists, continue. What was it? What was the first one that he said?
Oh, he said teacher. Yeah. He said teacher. What's that? Okay.
Yeah, if you're going to study philosophy, you have to be a teacher. But so many people have talked about the situation in academia, and a lot of people who are career academics really feel horrendous now because they have so many students that they're training, and they know the only option for this education path that this person is on is teacher. It's like college professor, right?
Right.
But they know there's way more students being trained than they actually need to do the job. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Right. So they're starting to feel horrible about it. But this is why college professor, I mean, that's not even a stable job in this day and age. They have so many college professors that are just like adjunct professors that teach 2 classes a semester or whatever, and they're never going to tenure because they put so many people on this track.
There's a great clip from an episode of Archer where I forget why, he's on an island with pirates, and there's a guy who's been, David Cross, who's voicing the character, has been basically captured by the pirates, and he's studying. He's like, "What are you studying?" And he says he's a graduate student. He said, "What are you studying?" He says, "Philosophy." And Archer starts laughing at him, and he says, "What are you going to do with your graduate degree?" And then he says, "Oh, well, I'm going to become a philosophy teacher." And then Archer says, "Well, you're just going to continue the cycle."
It's true. It's true. That's the whole.
Right. And so, you're right. But that's the problem, is that because there's so many more kids going to colleges, so many more getting into fields which are basically just academic fields, which are unsustainable, essentially.
Yeah, I just listened to a podcast, and they were talking about how the enrollment in philosophy and sociology is like tanked in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And they're worried about it. It was a podcast by a bunch of objectivists. They were saying, look, we're dying out here. No one's
interesting.
Which right. I mean, I thought, well, this is like a win. This is like great. I'm listening. They're talking about the future of the field, and I'm going, die. Die already.
Well, listen, I don't have any negative animus towards philosophy teachers or people studying philosophy at all. Philosophy is a very interesting field. It's a very useful field. But when it comes to getting a job, I mean, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot to some extent.